Coffee is one of the most consumed products in the world. But behind this simple drink is a story that stretches across centuries, connecting legend, science, empires, global trade, and modern addiction. And it all begins not in a city, not in a laboratory, but in the wild forests of Africa. In Ethiopia, there's an old legend that starts with something unexpected: goats. Farmers in rural regions began noticing something strange. After eating berries from a certain wild plant, their goats became unusually energetic, restless, almost uncontrollable. They didn't behave like normal animals anymore. It looked as if something inside them had been switched on. A kind of natural stimulation nobody could explain. Around 850 AD, according to the most famous version of the story, a goat herder named Kaldi notices this behavior. His goats are eating bright red berries from a strange bush. After consuming them, they start jumping, running, and acting with intense energy. Curious, Kaldi decides to try the berries himself, and that night, he cannot sleep at all. His mind stays awake, alert, and active far beyond normal. But what he actually discovered was not just a berry. It wasn't even a berry in the biological sense. It was a fruit closely related to cherries. That is why even today, we call them coffee cherries. Inside each fruit is a seed. That seed is what the world now knows as coffee. At that time, however, nobody roasted it, nobody brewed it, and nobody turned it into a drink. People simply ate the fruit for energy, without fully understanding what it was doing to the human body. The reason behind this effect is caffeine, but caffeine is not just a simple stimulant. In nature, it functions as a chemical defense mechanism. The coffee plant produces it to protect itself from insects and animals. For insects, caffeine is toxic. It disrupts their nervous system, overloading it until their biological functions fail. In humans, the effect is different, but still powerful. It does not kill us, it manipulates us. In 1995, NASA conducted experiments observing the effects of caffeine on spiders. After giving them controlled doses, scientists noticed something unusual. The spiders' webs became chaotic and irregular. Instead of structured geometric patterns, their webs turned disorganized, as if their internal sense of construction had been disrupted. Other studies later showed that caffeine also influences bee behavior, affecting navigation and memory, which can change how they interact with flowers and environments. But nature does not stay passive. Over time, some organisms adapt. One of the most well-known examples is the coffee borer beetle. This small insect developed a unique adaptation, bacteria in its gut that can break down caffeine. This allows it to survive inside coffee plants that would normally be toxic to other insects. As a result, it has become one of the most destructive pests in global coffee agriculture. For centuries, coffee remained something primitive, eaten raw, used in small local traditions, or consumed in early experiments. But around the 15th century, something changed in Yemen. People began roasting coffee beans and brewing them into a drink. This was the moment coffee transformed from a wild plant into a cultural object. It stopped being food and became a beverage. Sufi monks were among the first to widely adopt it. They used coffee to stay awake during long night prayers and meditation sessions. It helped extend focus and alertness during hours of spiritual practice. From Yemen, coffee slowly spread across the Middle East and North Africa, becoming part of daily life in many societies. But coffee did not remain just a drink, it became a social force. In the Ottoman Empire, coffeehouses began appearing in cities. These places were not just for drinking coffee. They became centers of communication, debate, and political discussion. People gathered there to exchange ideas, argue, and talk freely. In some cases, these spaces became so influential that authorities saw them as a threat. In 1511, coffee was even put on trial in Mecca, where some leaders attempted to ban it. The concern was not only religious, it was also political. Coffee houses allowed people to gather outside direct control, creating spaces where opinions and ideas could spread freely. In parts of the Ottoman world, coffee became so important that it was said a woman could legally seek divorce if her husband failed to provide her with coffee. This shows how deeply the drink had already entered everyday life. When coffee reached Europe in the 17th century, it was initially met with suspicion. Some people called it strange, bitter, or even dangerous. But everything changed when Pope Clement VIII tried it and reportedly approved it instead of banning it. After that moment, coffee spread rapidly across Europe. Coffee houses began to appear in major cities, becoming centers of intellectual life. Writers, scientists, philosophers, traders, all gathered in these spaces. Some historians even refer to them as penny universities because for the price of a coffee, you could access discussions that shaped ideas, science, and even politics. Coffee also became deeply connected to global trade and empire expansion. European powers began cultivating coffee in colonies. The Dutch introduced it to Java. The French spread it across the Caribbean. Eventually, Brazil became the largest producer in the world. But this growth came with a dark cost, deforestation, and the use of enslaved labor. Coffee was no longer just a natural product. It became an economic engine tied to global systems of exploitation. In the 19th and 20th centuries, coffee entered the industrial era. Machines changed how it was prepared. Espresso was invented in Italy, making coffee faster and more concentrated. Later, instant coffee appeared, designed for speed and mass consumption. During both world wars, coffee was widely supplied to soldiers, becoming a source of energy on the battlefield. It was no longer just cultural or social, it became strategic. In the modern world, coffee has become a global system. Today, humans drink around 2.5 billion cups of coffee every single day. The United States alone consumes hundreds of millions of cups daily. On a per-person basis, countries like Finland lead global consumption. Coffee is now one of the most valuable commodities on Earth, with a massive global industry worth hundreds of billions of dollars. But this system is fragile. Coffee only grows in a narrow geographic zone, known as the coffee belt, located around the equator. It requires specific temperature, altitude, and rainfall conditions. Climate change is threatening these conditions, shifting rainfall patterns and increasing temperatures. At the same time, diseases like coffee leaf rust have already destroyed entire plantations in different regions of the world. There are two dominant species in global production: Arabica, known for its smooth and complex flavor, and Robusta, which is stronger, more bitter, and contains more caffeine while being more resistant to disease and climate changes. Beyond that, coffee has evolved into a specialty industry, where origin, soil, altitude, and processing methods all define flavor profiles. Washed, natural, and honey-processed coffees all create completely different taste experiences from the same plant. And then there are extreme cases, rare and expensive coffees processed in unusual ways, including beans that are collected after passing through animal digestion, then cleaned, roasted, and sold as luxury products. Despite all of this complexity as science, history, trade, and controversy, coffee remains a constant part of human life. It wakes people up in the morning, it fuels work, study, and long nights. It shapes routines, habits, and even culture itself. But at the same time, it also reflects something deeper about humanity, our dependence on stimulation, our search for energy, and our constant balance between productivity and exhaustion. Coffee is not just a drink. It is a global system that quietly runs through human life every single day.